Yo, what's going on, everybody? We are back. It is a brand new season of the Dana White Contender Series. So, we got to bring the heat. We got to bring the breakdowns back. And who better to do it with than my brother from another? We've been doing these Contender Series year over year. We had a great year the first time we did it. We had a so-so year the last time we did it. Let's get back into that perfect column this year with my man Gordo Gambles. Excited to do it with you once again, my brother. We're doing the cross-channel thing this year, and we're going to make it rock and roll. Brother, how are you? How you feeling about week number 1 for the Contender Series, my man?
Dude, I'm feeling good. I feel like you look forward to this all year, right? An extra day to go out there and watch some fights. One that goes a bit overlooked, but that's good for us, right? We get to break it down, talk some fights on a Tuesday or actually on a Monday, and then also go out there and bet them. Usually these lines are a bit back and forth because people aren't doing it as much. We're able to get a little bit of an edge. It's fun nonetheless. We've been doing this for the past few years. We wouldn't want to do it with anybody else. Appreciate you joining me one more time and looking forward to another opportunity to make some money.
Absolutely, guys. Want to let you guys know right off the rip, programming note, we're going to be switching back and forth week to week. So if you're not already subscribed to the Plays and Fades YouTube channel, make sure that you get subscribed to the Plays and Fades YouTube channel, because next week, that's where we're going to be rocking and rolling. But this week, we've got a lot of great action to talk about, so let's not fret. Let's not dilly-dally at all. We've got, in the first fight of the night, man, at 125 pounds, some flyweight action kicking us off. If the card that just took place in Nashville was any indication, I know you were there taking in the fights, my brother. I hope you had a great time. Them flyweights delivered with the violence, with the action. A lot of big-time performances, a lot of unders, a lot of violence, right? And now we got another violence weight kind of fight to start us off. Borjas on the one hand, Kevin Borjas, very dangerous guy with the hands, a guy who's going to go out there, get in your face, throw a lot of strikes. You see in some of these fights, even the fights he lost, he went out there and dropped that guy in the first round, put him on the ground, looked like he had opportunities to finish. He's controlling the hips, he's moving him around, and then he gets in some dicey situations, looks like he's starting to gas, gives up a bad situation, gets submitted. And you look at his opponent in this matchup, Victor Diaz on the other side. This is a guy who's training with Pantoja, right? Did a lot of training in Brazil, looked like he had gotten, a life for himself, but then found some guys that he met. I believe it was Marlon Moraes, Edson Barbosa. They moved to American Top Team. If you remember, that was big news when those guys picked up and moved to go to American Top Team to get some better work. He went along on this journey, and he's been training with Pantoja, hand in hand in these recent training camps. I read an interview where Pantoja is saying this guy is top 10 in the world right now. This guy would easily come in and compete with the top guys in the UFC right now. And so when I see that, the line that corresponds with this fight kind of makes sense to me. If you've got the backing of the flyweight champion, if I'm looking at your style matchup, it looks like you're a guy who's going to implement these submissions, and it's a guy who's potentially struggling on the ground when fights get there. I think that's something to look at here. Even when he was still in good spirits, hadn't been hurt in that fight, he was in some dicey ground exchanges, at earlier points. So I feel like we've seen a little bit of the writing on the wall with Borjas, that he's got very good striking and he's a dangerous guy. He's a tough guy, wants to get in a fight, getting better all the time, but he's still very young. And we've seen submissions have been the thing that's really held him back. I think this is a terrible matchup for that reason. Gordo, how do you feel about this first matchup, my brother?
Yeah, an interesting one, and one where we do have ourselves a bit of an opponent switch up too. Borjas was supposed to fight Van, who's already got a shot and a win in the UFC already, and then he got another opponent. Diaz coming in a bit later, and it feels like a great way for him to get his first opportunity to get towards that UFC. And I think before we even talk about this fight, we have to remember, Dana White Contender Series, we're out here, we're looking for future prospects, right? We're looking to be Joe Pyfer and make Dana White happy and go out there and be entertaining. And in someone like this, someone like Victor Diaz here, and someone like Kevin Borjas for that right here, two action-paced guys who are going to go out there and look to win a contract, but with very polarizing styles here, right? So you have that guy in Borjas who is going to be that striker. All his wins come by knockout, a ton of power, pretty good technically as well, but he throws with fight any intention. And I think that although that is a path for him, he's kind of limited to that, right? He's a primary striker. He is someone who wants to go out there and have success in that, right? And he's facing a guy who I think has more paths to getting it done, which is kind of where the lines reflected that. We also look at it too, like we have a guy who is so dynamic on the ground, someone who trains at a great camp, someone who is just super, super explosive and technical down there. There's a guy who's been submitted in his losses, a guy who can be taken down and controlled, and a guy who doesn't really have that same jiu-jitsu background. It seems like there's a clear disparity because on the feet, I do believe Victor Diaz can keep his own. He can go out there and fight a close fight in the feet against the primary striker, but on the ground, there's no question about it. To add that to, when you see these jiu-jitsu guys, you really question, is their wrestling good enough to get it there? I think so. And I think not only does Diaz has the wrestling to get it there, but once it's there, it's his world. You add in the fact that he's training with a good camp. I do think he has the cardio edge, the minute winning ability. The reason Victor Diaz is a large favorite is plenty. There's a lot of reason to back him here, and I do think he's the rightful favorite. It should be a very violent affair, and I think if we're looking at the prop market when it does come out, one that the violence should be anticipated. So huge ground discrepancy for Diaz there. Solid striking and power from Borjas, which is kind of his limited path to victory, but I do think Diaz takes over, melts him on the ground, and gets an early finish here.
I love where your head's at, my man. We tend to agree on this one. Obviously, the odds are tending to agree on this one as well. You're looking at a big favorite here. I'm pulling up the odds right as we speak. We've got Victor Diaz at BetOnline sitting at a minus 355 favorite compared to a plus 280 comeback on the underdog here in Borjas. And, it's not like I don't think Borjas could win this fight. I just think he's got a very limited path here. And I feel like, he's a guy that might be a 2 or 3 time Contender Series alum. He's very young and he's still making some improvements over time. He's from Peru, a market that they're trying to nurture, it seems like to me, with the prospects that they're developing. Daniel Marcos, for example, there's definitely a Peruvian contingency, and he trains with some of the best guys in Peru. So he's going to continue to get better. The Barzolas, the people like this that have gotten work in his gym, it looks like he's getting the best work he can. But then you look at the other side and this guy's getting work with like just killer after killer after killer every day in the room, every day on the mats. Kyoji Horiguchi's of the world, the whole American top team roster at those weight classes is staggering how much talent he's working with. Even Buchecha, I know he got upset over the weekend, but another elite Brazilian jiu-jitsu player that's working with them, frequently. So it just seems like they're getting a lot higher level talent in the room on a frequent basis. He's 32 years of age. It's now or never for him. And that's why he's been trying to get an opportunity. If you listen to his interviews and if you check out the things that have been written about him, he's been trying to get fights. Nobody wants to fight him on the regional scene. He's been sitting with a title like, please, somebody, come take this title from me. Nobody wants the opportunity. So he says, now I got my shot. And I feel like this is a short notice opportunity where a guy's been waiting for a short notice opportunity. I think he's going to be prepared, but short notice, we did see a bunch of people struggle with that on the UFC card. So that's the only thing that makes me a little bit less bullish on maybe the money line prices. We got to remember at the end of the day, it's Contender Series. Guys are going to come out there and fight very volatile styles, right? They're going to bring the fire. They're going to try and get that contract and be exciting. So that could just enter a little bit more volatility. I think of the Charlie Campbell fight where he looked cleaner than Chris Duncan throughout. He looked like he was landing the better strikes, but then it all can go sideways so quick. So we just want to keep in mind, the nature of this show. Wait, this Contender Series start tomorrow. Yes, indeed, Mike. Welcome aboard. Hope that you drop a like on the video because me and our guy Gordo are going to try and walk you through as best we can. But for me, lean here is to the under. Lean here is to the ends by sub. I think that Victor Diaz is probably going to get this guy on the ground and end up finishing him. Pretty conventional take there, but it's just the way I see it going down. So I'm going to keep it straight with you guys. Next up, we got Payton Talbott taking on Reyes Cortez. And this is speaking of returning Contender Series alumnus, yep. Right? I was looking through, searching into my, my drive for this week, trying to see, hey, what do I got? Do I have any notes on the fighters this week? And for most of these guys, the answer was no, right? I had to do a lot of work. I've been sitting in front of a computer all day. So I'm excited to talk now and get some of these thoughts out of my brain and into the world. But in terms of what we're looking at in this fight, Reyes Cortez, I had noted, he hasn't really fought the best competition, not really fought the most developed guys, but you look at the training room that he's in, you look at the quality of guys that he's around. He does look like a guy who projects to make improvements over time, right? He's got a sister in the UFC. He's around all the right people. He seems like he's getting personalized attention from Henry Cejudo, personalized attention from Eddie Cha, from Santino DeFranco, just a lot of really top, names in the game at Fight Ready. And so I think of Fight Ready as a very good gym that prepares guys, that gets them in good shape, that can get them in shape to wrestle and grapple for 15 minutes. And I think that is his path to winning this fight, Gordo. I'm curious if you agree. But for me, he does not want to be mixing things up on the feet with somebody like Payton Talbott more often than not. And he's been working on his striking. You see that in his Instagram and some things like that. So I'll leave this matchup to you first, my brother. Why don't you let us know what you think? But I just wanted to set the table a little bit with what we're expecting here because Reyes, this is kind of do or die for him. Really important fight for his career. Kind of needs this one. Talbott's still just 5-0, very young guy, but he does seem like he's got a bright future. Seems like a very talented prospect. And we've seen him face adversity regionally and come back and deal with it. So seems like a kid who's got, the right fortitude to fight.
Yeah, no, it is another really close one to keep the fight night going, and one that I think you could look at from a variety of ways. And I think the first thing to point out is that name value that Reyes Cortez brings. I mean, being going out there training with the right people and being in those right rooms. And I really feel like we've seen that across his career. I mean, he's his second time coming back here, and he's someone who has been able to get some favorable matchups in the past in order to get here in the first place. I mean, his combined opponent's record is like 14-13, I think. And at this point, when he's fighting at such a good gym, you'd think that he's the guy that UFC's kind of trying to promote here. But the other side of things, you got a guy in Payton Talbott, 24 years old. He's going to be the younger fighter, the taller fighter, a guy who's still really growing into his own as a mixed martial artist, who's potentially fought even lesser competition, but ones with a better record as well. And I mean, he's coming in here a really dangerous fighter with 5 KOs, and you really see his striking starting to evolve down the stretch as well. And it seems that this could shape up to be a very, very good matchup, because the main thing you go out there and you watch with Payton Talbott is he's a very aggressive offensive striker, and he's very talented at that. That seems to be his primary weapon. He may lack some defensive attributes, but you know that he's going to go out there and put on a show. Strike with high volume, high technicality, mixes things up very well to the body up top as well. And, you know, if Cortez was someone who was maybe a chin liability or maybe a fish out of water on the feet, then I completely understand why back to Payton Talbott here. And I still understand why people are doing it. But I think in a mixed martial artist, an MMA fight, when you have the opportunity to mix it up in multiple areas, I'm going to have to side with Reyes Cortez here. I think it's a very, very close fight. But if we look at the discrepancy in all these areas here, the largest discrepancy for me is on the ground. And I think that Cortez has the ability to mix it up here and win minutes that way, whereas it's very, very competitive on the feet. Yes, I give the edge to Talbot on the feet in terms of winning the minutes that way, but Cortez can land his own there. Considering the lack of striking defense from Payton Talbot, Cortez can land some shots in his own right and does throw with pretty good power there to win some moments as well. So I think what it comes down to is a guy who's going to be the more offensive fighter, pushing forward, being the better optic striker is going to be Payton Talbot, but the guy with more paths to getting it done, being the wrestling, the grappling, the powerful shots against a guy with less striking defense, is me Reyes Cortez. And I think it's a fun fight here, where if the line keeps climbing, I'll have to go out there and back someone like Cortez. In my eyes, I think it goes down to a very close decision. I wasn't going to touch it originally, but I also expected Reyes Cortez to get more love. So if this line keeps inflating, I might have to take a stance here.
You know what's interesting, Gordo? And one thing I did is I have not looked at the lines really. You know, that was something I didn't put much emphasis on when I had looked at both sides of the matchup. Then I went and looked at some of the odds for these fights, but I hadn't really prioritized looking at the odds. I just wanted to know what were my opinions on these fighters to come in and try and have a prepared conversation in that way. And to see that Payton Talbott opened here as a plus 145 underdog is very interesting to me, pulling that up on Bet Online. Like you spoke about, some volatility with these lines. The line has flipped completely. Now you're looking at a guy who opened plus 145 sitting at a minus 170. The comeback on Reyes Cortez here, now plus 145 on the very same book. So I think that what we're looking at when I look at a matchup like this is Reyes Cortez definitely has a path with the wrestling in this matchup. That is what he can do in this fight, because you look at Payton Talbott in his last fight, he went out there, he got the knockout, but it was in part a function of his opponent slowing down, because really we saw that his opponent had all the tools to take him down, ground him. He did a good job of building back up to his feet. He actually showed a multifaceted skill set as well, right? He went to that armbar series. I was stunned that guy didn't tap. I was stunned that it didn't break his arm. He did a really good job getting out of that. He kind of did one of the half tap, push the knee open. God bless him for it, right? Anything to survive there. That guy was a really game opponent, and he got so much damage incurred so quickly. He couldn't do anything about it, right? Standing TKO in that fight. And I haven't seen those kind of same optics from Reyes Cortez, right? I don't think that it's as likely, but I do think Talbot is a guy who's capable of dealing out a lot of damage quick. That's the one thing that I think is probably enticing people at those plus money numbers. Is number one, he's this big guy, long guy. He can hit from far away. And a lot of guys like that, they just don't generate as much power on the strikes. Even you think about somebody like Sean Woodson, beat Dennis Bazooka from pillar to post. Very square read by me. And shout out to my guy Gordo who told me. But in any case, right, he still is landing just unobstructed strikes over and over and not putting him down. Just didn't seem like he has the power. We've noted that before. Whereas we see a guy like this, he's landing those uppercuts, and every time he would land, this guy was, on Dream Street. He's getting dropped. He's getting rocked. He's getting wobbled. So I feel like we've seen a lot of power from Talbot, and I don't feel like getting on the wrong side of that. I feel like the totals in this are very correlated as well. I feel like if this fight ends in under 2.5 rounds, that Payton Talbott probably wins it more often than not. I think Reyes Cortez, maybe he could get a submission here. I just don't see him knocking out Talbot. Talbot was unaffected by every strike I saw him eat. We'll talk about another guy on this card who's like extremely a chin monster, right? There's just some people that can take a crazy punch. And so far, because Talbot's young, he's still very fresh, and he wants to be out there. There's no giving the guy. It doesn't seem like he's got a lot of dog. That's a guy who I feel like very hard for me to bet against. But admittedly, when you get the plus money tag, it becomes more appealing. We have seen the path is there with the wrestling. So it should be an interesting fight, man. The one thing I'll leave you with here is I love the why for Reyes Cortez. He seemed much more mature. I felt like in the interviews that I've seen, in everything that I've seen from him in the media, in his social media, and everything leading up to this fight, just seems like he's in a much more mature place in his life. And I liked what I was hearing from him. So I think he's going to give a great account of himself, and can't blame anybody for taking the plus money. But I must say I was also really impressed by Talbot here as a prospect. So I feel like this is going to be a fun fight to watch, but I don't know that I'll be getting to the window on this fight. I feel like I'd be more inclined to bet that first fight looking at an under than I would this second fight, just because I think there's a little bit more volatility. I could see both guys getting the win. But next up.
For sure. And
we can – please, go ahead, man.
No problem here. I just like it when we disagree on things. We're going out there. I completely understand you going out there and backing a guy like Talbot. He's still young, making improvements, and I get why he is slightly favored. I mean, his offensive striking allows a path for him to win. But I think when I'm looking at numbers here, when he doesn't have, I think, the best defense, when he can be hit, when he can be taken down, and Reyes Cortez has the cardio and durability to go out there and keep up with this guy for a while, or at least that's what we see. I think that a guy who's 24 years old, still improving, shouldn't be too much more than 60% implied or something like that as well. So the more the number climbs, the more intriguing it gets. But you know what? There's 5 fights. You don't have to force action at all. I haven't played this fight yet because I think that there are better options on this card, but might have my hand forced if the line keeps climbing.
I definitely feel that, my man. And it's always a price discovery. Odds makers thought it was a different price, right? They thought it should be this guy favored, and now you're getting a much different opportunity. So I think waiting and seeing what happens here. One thing we noticed in Contender Series markets, guys, they're not as well developed.
Is that my end? Oh, it is. It's not my end. All right. Well, it seems like we've lost Liam here. Hopefully he'll come back here. Is it me? Is it me who froze here? We'll figure it out. There we go. Okay, so it's me here. I'll take over on this one. I know Liam's going to try to get back here ASAP, get his input in here. I don't want to take too much away from him, but this is one I am interested in. Look, there we go. Just me up here. I can't even control anything because I'm not even the host, but we'll talk our heart away there. Thank everybody in the chat for keeping us going here. But no, this is a very, very fun fight. Actually, probably the one I'm looking forward to maybe the most because it seems to be a very action-packed fight with 2 big boys going at it. And with that being said, especially on the Dana White Contender Series aspects side of things, it's one where it could be dangerous, right? Because although they do have a ton of power that could look good, or you could have a guy that turned into a very, very sloppy heavyweight matchup here. And I'm hoping for the first part of here, but we break down both these guys. I mean, on Machado on the side of things, I mean, you're fighting a Canadian fight scene like that there. Not the best level of competition there, but a guy who's still on the younger side of things for heavyweight, a guy who's still looking to make the proper improvements, and a guy who's very, very dynamic. He starts fast, put everything to his punches, and he's a pretty scary guy in his own right. Flip side of things, you have a guy in Szaflarski, a guy who I have tape on from last year, supposed to fight Jimmy Lawson, had some problems there, but a guy from Poland who is a big boy, 28 years old, 6'6", 11-1 here, and a guy who has racked off some decent wins in his own right, and a guy who, has a decent frame for heavyweight and a decent overall skill set. I mean, a good jab, a good cardio, really, which is what you want to see from a heavyweight at this point, and a guy who's overall strong. I think a good comparison you could have to him is someone like I just taped this weekend. Here we go. Hey, Liam. How we doing, my friend? I'll finish up my points here for you. But a guy kind of like Martin Boudet, a guy who doesn't have the most power on the feet, but a great jab, great cardio. And shall he go there? Shall he get top position? Good ground and pound, good top control as well, being a heavy guy and someone who I think has a good fundamental skill set for the UFC here. When it comes down to breaking down the matchup, though, I think we have two polarizing matchups here. If we look at the dynamics on the feet, the fight ending intention, Machado's got that side of things in my eyes, and I think he is the much more dangerous striker out here. A ton of power, throws everything into it, a lot of fast twitch muscle fibers to go out there and land, and I think if he does do that, he could hurt Szaflarski here, a guy who is slower, and a guy who could not react the best to these strikes here. What I will say, though, is although I do like Machado to go out there, not only utilize that striking on the feet, a lot of power, but also show a decent ground game shall it get there, is Szaflarski's cardio is a lot better in this spot for me, which is why I'm kind of leaning off of it, because although Machado may be the better fighter early on, we don't really know what he looks like when the fight goes on. He's a guy who is a bit slower here as it goes, and I see I'm talking fast. I get that. Yeah, I'm French, so I talk fast sometimes. He is someone who is also real tougher to back down the stretch. Either way, though, a very, very fun fight. When we're going to have to lean Machado here as an underdog, surprisingly, because I do think that skill for skill, he is the better fighter. And I know that when I'm betting on him, I am assuming the risk that he could tire down the stretch. But I don't think I want to go out there and rely on a guy in Szaflarski who I think's major win condition is predicated on his opponent gassing here. So give me the guy who I see to be the better striking threat, a guy who I think have more dynamics on the feet, and a guy who I think is going to go out there and try to put a statement win on Tuesday night here and get into the UFC. So give me Machado a dog price tag.
Yeah, man. And, first of all, you got to stand up for your Canadian brother, because our guy is the BFL champion up in Vancouver, right? He's putting on, he's showing out. And, when you're looking at this guy, he's also a Brazilian, right? So he's a Brazilian, Canadian by extraction, right? Kind of was looking for what to do in life, was like, all right, you know what? I'm going to get out here. I like martial arts. I'll venture out, see how things are in Canada, see what it's like out there. And then he found a coach that he liked out there. He's been there ever since, training at a pancration kickboxing gym up there. But you look at a lot of his fights, he's getting the win via armbar. He's relying on his black belt in Brazilian jiu-jitsu that he went back to Brazil to go get, So I just think that this is a guy that's shown some improvements over time. To be perfectly frank, the most research that I have to do to feel comfortable on this fight card is on Kevin Szaflarski here. I haven't done as much research on him. I was doing more of my research on the Machado side here. Number one, because he's the plus money dog, but number two, because he's a guy with a lot of 5-round experience coming in here. And you don't see that often for heavyweights, but this is a guy who came in, and I think his second fight, he's in a main event, or his third fight, so he's just a guy who's kind of been groomed the right way, where he got a lot of experience. Now, granted, 2 of his wins are over the same guy who's over 50 years of age, right? So you look at that and you go, okay, a little bit of padding on the record, but you can only fight the best guys you could fight, right? And the best guys in the area, that was one of them. He fought another guy who was a big, powerful, hulking striker that came after him and tried to kill him in the early going, landed some big shots, and it looked like that fight was going to go sideways for him. But he was able to rally there. He was able to get his own big shots going, hurt the other guy. So he seems like a guy who is willing to go through a little bit of adversity in these fights to come out the other side ahead. And that's kind of an attribute that I look for, especially in heavyweights, because heavyweights oftentimes, one uncomfortable position and the fight's over, right? They're going to end up quitting on you. But this guy got reversed. He got swept. He got put in some bad positions. He got taken down. If you look at a few of these fights, and he's found ways to rally, found ways to win, found ways to outlast other big heavyweights. So I feel like he's a guy that could definitely keep this competitive. I think it's probably going to be a greasy, sloppy heavyweight type of affair. But I do got to just mention, we got that Renzo Gracie affiliation on the other side. Our Renzo Gracie boys and girls still be getting it done here, there, and everywhere. So want to give that shout, but I don't think he's been training there very much. I didn't find much evidence of him training in the gi, for example. So he seems like a guy who is maybe, just now getting that Renzo Gracie rub, maybe starting to get some more training in the States. But I think that for the most part, he had been training with guys in his local area. I think the best kind of guys he had been training with was like an Oleg Zaitchik type character. So yeah, that was kind of my final thoughts here. Anything else you wanted to add on this one, Gordo? No,
it's one where you can make the argument to go out there and take Szaflarski based on the downfall and the criticisms you can make of Machado here. But I do think that skill for skill and the way that it looked, especially in the early going, Machado's going to be a very, very dangerous guy to go against here. And for that reason, I think that I'm going to have to take a stab at this plus 155 here. I think that might have to be the first bet we lock in here. And it should be a fun one for as long as it lasts.
Love it, man. Another one, I'm expecting that one to end inside the distance more often than not. You know, the one thing I'll say, though, is leave it to the heavyweights to just turn in an absolute stinker leaning against the fence. We've seen that a million times on Contender Series as well. When everything is on the line, that could lead to two different reactions. You put it all on the line or you try and play real conservative. So just one thing to think about as well. If you're getting cute with the methods, you got a plus 155 on the underdog here. So you got options here to play this fight a few different ways. Next up, we've got the co-main event of the evening, my brother. Tom Nolan taking on Bogdan Grad. And Tom Nolan, big guy, right? That's the thing that stands out the most. You look at these two guys next to each other. Holy smokes, big difference in size here. But then you watch, the confidence level. There is, no lack of confidence from the shorter man in this instance. He's a guy who's going to come in there with a lot of aggression, throws a lot of big, heavy shots, throws to multiple levels of the body, head, as well as the body and the legs consistently with his kicks. He throws very hard kicks as well. Invest in the calf kicks. His ground and pound is disgusting, really, really dangerous. This Bogdan Grad guy, I was not sure what to expect from Bogdan Grad. Austrian fight scene, wasn't really sure what to expect. I think he's Romanian, by nationality. He's a guy that, for me, looks like he's very powerful athletically, looks like he's a very aggressive fighter, looks like he really wants to be in there doing violence with people. And he's got a somewhat inexperienced guy on the other side in Nolan at the professional level, right? Mostly got his experience in Australia. He's fought some tough guys over there for sure in Eternal MMA. But I do think there's still a little bit of a learning curve with only 5 professional fights under his belt. Was knocked out in amateur MMA in 2018. So, does show the ability to get finished. I haven't gotten a chance to watch that fight, but I do think that what we've seen from Nolan is that he's got power, size. He's gotten finishes in his last 3 fights. He's definitely a guy who's, very equipped physically to make a run here. But we've also seen, Crystal puts in the chat here, we have Klein versus Bahamondes at home, sweetie. Yeah, well, what we're looking at here is another one of these matchups with a 6'3" lightweight. But 6'3" lightweights don't always win. They can get grounded. They can also get hurt. They can get hit with big shots. And I have to say, I was wrong about Ludovic Klein not being able to get the high kick up there. I mean, the guy's flexibility was just unbelievable. He's getting high kicks up, well above his own head. He's like 5'8". He's kicking 6'3" in the air and a little bit higher. Just unbelievable stuff. So I feel like that is kind of anomalous. I would be a little bit surprised to see the same kind of, dexterity here. But I do think that this is a kind of fight where both guys can win. And I like the fact that we have a little bit more experience on the Bogdan side, as well as an ability to mix it up, right? Could I see him winning this fight by knockout on the feet? Absolutely. But I've also seen him land nasty, vicious ground and pound on the ground and finish people, take dominant positions like mounted triangles, looking for those finishes. I feel like if he does those kind of things in this fight, he could end up exploiting somebody like Nolan, who's still finding their, footing in MMA. So great fight, really fun scrap. Don't know who's going to get the best of it, but I think that, again, we're dealing with Bogdan Grad here at the plus money underdog price, open at about a plus 110, now looking at around a plus 135, a plus 140. This just, to me, feels like a dogger pass situation. I feel like both of these guys have a lot of really good skills that they could leverage here, and the size is definitely a factor. But I feel like the size can be muted if you're on your back, and I wouldn't be surprised if he got put on his back here. So it should be a fun scrap. Gordo, how do you feel about this one, brother?
Yeah, man, this is one of the first ones I taped. I messaged you right away as we watched that Bogdan Grad line shift towards that favorite price tag. And in my eyes, I thought that was a better indication of where this fight should go. Because doing my tape at first, you go out there and you see a very, very explosive guy, a guy who's pretty scary to watch anyways, because he has such good explosiveness, athleticism, and ability to close the fight and get it done a multitude of ways. And although not the biggest guy, a guy who has a ton of power and a ton of ability to close that distance. You look at the Nolan side of things too, a lot of things to be impressed with. I mean, he has a lot of good attributes about him as well. And I think what I didn't see too much was the height discrepancy. I mean, you look at the face-offs today, and that was something that I didn't take into account too much. I didn't realize how big Nolan truly was. So I went back, rewatched the tape, and it kind of still went in there solidified. And although he does have that height, he does have that advantages there, I still think that this line should be a bit closer. I understand the love and the path to victory for Nolan, really just sticking, moving outside, using his range and doing that. But I think he's going to have to utilize that for 15 minutes, one where he's going to have an absolute powerhouse of a man in front of him, looking to close distance, looking to land with fighting intention every shot, and looking to utilize that grappling as well, to which I think he has the advantages there. And to me, there is just more time, more 15 minutes for Grad to go out there to justify his price tag, because he has so many ways to get it done. I mean, if we even go back and we look at Nolan's style as well, although we want him to go out there, utilize that range, he likes to fight in the pocket. He likes to get dirty as well. And I don't think that's necessarily the best path to victory for someone here, especially who is facing a guy as dangerous as Bogdan Grad here. So to me, very high pace from Bogdan. A guy's going to go forward, close the distance, and really have 15 minutes to execute a dangerous game plan, one where I do think he has more finish equity, more grappling equity, and one where I do think he has more paths of victory to get his hand raised at the end of the day, and one that I think he is, although with not the best anthropomorphic advantages, someone who I wouldn't mind backing underdog price tags. That's 3 underdogs in a row. Again, a very, very dangerous one, but one where I think Grad is very, very dangerous to go out there and look like a hindsight favorite.
I'm with you, my man. And again, sometimes I think that people can get a little too bullish on Contender Series favorites, right? Because people look really good, but then they go out there and they might not fight like themselves because, number one, these are some of the highest pressure fights that they could possibly be in. And number two, sometimes they fight against type. So you want to give yourself a little bit more outs. And I feel like a guy like this has a little bit more outs, a little bit more paths to victory than his opponent. So when that's the case, and again, we're not having to lay chalk, we're not having to say, I'm confident this happens more than 50% of the time. I think it gives you a little bit of a better chance to win long-term. So that's how I'm approaching Contender Series this year. You know, if there's a favorite that I feel it's just completely mispriced, so maybe I get there, but it's just something that I don't want to make a habit of doing on too many of these fights, because there's so much inherent volatility in the show. That was the point I was making when the internet monster came and swallowed me before. So I'll stop talking about it now before I anger the internet gods. But my man, when it comes to this fight card, I did not spend more time breaking down any other fight than this one. The main event, you know, Cesar Almeida taking on Lucas Fernando. And it's one that really caught my attention. And I'll tell you, I'm a grappler, right? I'm a wrestler. That's what I prefer to do. That's what I like to, go to as a background. But this is a fun fight because you got 2 Brazilian kickboxers that really want to go out there and bang it out on the feet more often than not. And I think on the one hand, you've got a guy here in Lucas Fernando who, you know, he seems like he's got more relevant MMA experience. I mean, who could say otherwise? He's been out there fighting good guys in MMA. He's been out there putting it on the line in LFA, a real organization where good guys compete. But I think that people maybe are discounting what Cesar Almeida has done in terms of setting the table for himself as a guy coming to MMA a little bit later in life. We've seen other guys who had a career in other combat sports, be that Daniel Cormier in wrestling, Israel Adesanya in kickboxing, Alex Pereira in kickboxing, many examples from all different sports where people make a second career for themselves in combat sports through hard work, through dedication, through a variety of skills that translate from one combat endeavor to another. I think when you look at what skills translate from one endeavor to another, Cesar Almeida has never been knocked out in over 40 kickboxing matches with the world-class kickboxers that are trying to kill you with kicks, knees, trying to take your head off in close. He's ducking spinning hook kicks from Alex Pereira. He fought the guy 3 times and he got dropped twice in the 3rd meeting. Make no mistake. And he got up and answered the bell and fought all the way through. The guy is a savage among men. So I look at this guy and I say, he's 35 years of age. Does he really have what it takes to compete in MMA today? And I go back and I watch his most recent kickboxing match, my brother. I don't know if you watched this, but it was against Wissy. I'm not a kickboxing guy. You'll never hear me say, I know everything about glory. I'm not that guy. But what I will say is I rewatched that fight. Very competitive, very honest fight. This is the number 1 guy in the world, dude. This is the champion. It was a non-title fight. And he fought him very close. He hurt him with calf kicks, like to the point where the guy had to switch stances and fight completely different against type. And he outlanded him, I think, by like a 2-1 margin in the 3rd round. It still ended up losing it close, but the guy went out there and competed very honest with the number one guy in the world in this weight. He also has a win over Alex Pereira, and it wasn't by knockout, right? He went out there, earned a decision. By the way, I rewatched the fight. Thought he won that fight. 29-28, close fight. Thought he won that fight. So it's like, this is a real striker with real good skills that's never been knocked out. And when you look at the fact that he's been embedded in the camp for Kelvin Gastelum before the Jared Cannonier fight at Fight Ready, when you look at the fact that he's been doing work at Extreme Couture in Las Vegas, getting work in with American grapplers, American wrestlers, Roman Dolidze, the list goes on of big guys, 185-pound grapplers that have been getting their hands on him in the training room. I feel like this is a guy who maybe has been working a little bit in silence. Yeah, his MMA wins aren't worth the paper they're printed on, right? He's beaten a bunch of complete jabronis. But when you look at what he's accomplished in kickboxing, it's substantial. And when you look at the guys he trains with, it does seem to me like a guy who's going to come out here with something to offer. Corinthians MMA, maybe not the highest level, but he's moved around and gotten more training outside of that. And his kickboxing is damn good. Like, it's damn good. So I look at his skill set and I say to myself, is his cardio perfect? No, but it also kind of comes and goes in waves. There's times he's coming on and winning rounds 2 and 3. I thought the Pereira fight, that was an example when he got the win there. That was a long time ago. But then you look at that fight that I was describing with Wissy most recently in 2023. Dude, he won the second and third round on some people's scorecards. So it's like the guy doesn't gas out that badly over the course of these fights either. So I just think to myself, what should make this guy, who's definitely a little bit bigger, definitely got a nice length to him and whatever, but what should make him such a substantial favorite over a guy who, if they both have it their way, most of the time they're going to go out there and kickbox. So it's like a guy who's never been knocked out kickboxing against a guy who likes to get knockouts on the feet is like a huge plus money dog. It just seems a little bit surprising to me. I'm curious what you think about this one, brother.
Yeah, no, I completely get the shot of going on the big dog here, especially when he has such good reputability and has that potential to go out there and land a knockout. And I think that when you are going out there and you are looking at Cesar Almeida, I mean, you're seeing a guy who, of course, is an amazing striker. I mean, really takes his time, very technical, very good timing. He has the ability to go out there and get good reads against someone. And I think that, of course, in a 15-minute kickboxing affair, he should be the favorite. But truth be told, it's not one here. And to me, although I respect the shot on the dog, I think when it comes gun to my head picking a winner, it's going to be Lucas Fernando here. I think we look at the guy in Cesar Almeida, who, although has all that experience and all that stuff, is really just getting started in MMA. 5-21-8, 5-28-1, a combined opponent's record. I know you mentioned that already, not worth anything, but a guy who's 35 years old coming on later, a guy who doesn't really have anything but that one-dimensional striking, who, albeit is a great weapon, doesn't have any other paths getting it done. Lucas Fernando, on the other side of things, 26 years old, the taller fighter, combined opponent's record of 55-16, like a much better level of competition over there, a champion of his own thing, and has a very well-rounded skill set. Yeah, he is a primary striker, but he has some very good underrated wrestling. He has a good ability to win on the ground as well, has some wins by submission. And once you get on top, I don't really see Almeida having any problems, any ability to get back up. The question really just is, does he utilize that wrestling, or does Almeida get him out of there first? And I think that's where things like the prop market comes into a good way of playing it, like KO only for someone like Almeida. But truth be told, the paths are there for Fernando, and that's why he's the favorite here. He has that grappling path to victory. He's going to have the top control, the ability to win it there, and he's just the overall better, well-rounded mixed martial artist at this point of his career, or at least from what we've seen. Almeida still is so unproven at this point that I can't go out there and back him in a mixed martial art fight because he has question marks around his grappling, question marks around his level of competition, and just doesn't have with a 9-year age discrepancy as well, isn't someone who I necessarily want to back at a high clip. That being said, though, would I be surprised if he goes out there and flatlines Fernando? Not necessarily, because he has that power. He is a very smart guy making good reads. I just think that when it comes to picking a winner, guy with more paths of victory, the guys with more ways to get it done, and the guy who is more proven at this point of his career is the younger fighter here in Fernando, a guy who I think does win this fight around the way the line indicates, but what is bound to be a very, very fun fight for as long as it lasts.
I could get to -185. I feel like -150 is like where I would instinctually put something like this. Because the one other thing I'll mention is, like, you look at the width, and again, it's not the greatest data point because it's kickboxing, right? And they do approach it different, but there is clinch fighting in kickboxing, right? This guy went out there and literally took down Wissy like 2 or 3 times. I was like, this guy is already in MMA. He's like, F this. Like, I'm just going for takedowns now, like hitting outside stepping trips. And I was like, is this guy like really just working on wrestling? And I feel like he is, right? His first MMA fight was in 2016. Is he just like all of a sudden like, oh, I guess I'll try it again? I feel like he's been quietly working, quietly getting better. So that's kind of my theory to this fight. If he hasn't been, he could get just roundly exposed in this fight. So that's the downside. That's the danger. I feel like this fight is also going to go under more often than not. You see Almeida has gone to decision a lot in kickboxing, but you watch these MMA fights, dude, in the 4-ounce gloves, he touched people once and they die. Like that was the other thing that stood out to me about the tape. He's not fighting anybody good, but when he hits them with one punch, they are dead, like just unconscious. I was like, holy smokes. And that's the thing that we saw with Pereira. Pereira and him both no-sold each other's power for a lot of those fights. But guys, they hit each other with like nuclear missiles that against most MMA fighters, they're going to sleep. Like it's not like normal striking. They're very high level. So that to me is the thing that distinguishes the two of them. I do think there's a little bit of a technical edge for Almeida on the feet. But it's going to be a fantastic fight. And that could be dealt with by the anthropomorphic advantages. So really compelling fight card, guys. As far as I'm concerned, we're getting back with a bang on Contender Series week 1. I have so much information on this card, and it's only going to keep growing because I've basically skeletoned out every fighter on the card to just continue adding to the tape as I do more and more study throughout the week, but have top line analysis on each and every one of these fighters already going. And man, I'm excited to get after it. Have some leans already waiting for these props, my man. It's been torture this week. I think that the books are getting, a little bit skittish about these Contender Series lines because they've gotten huge movement, not only on the money lines, but on the props in years past. And so I think that they're kind of minding their P's and Q's here a little bit, but here I am in the great state of New York, unable to bet on the Contender Series on any of our major sports books. So kid's going to have to take a ride over to Jersey today or potentially, figure out another way, maybe go to another state, but not going to be able to get it done in New York. That's the bottom line. So for me, a little bit short on luck, if you will, with some of these Contender Series lines. But again, it's going to focus the mind considerably, have that nice drive over there to think about the bets, make sure that I really want to part ways with my money on any of my given shots. But brother, it's been an absolute blast. Want to let you have the floor for anything you want to get off your chest, anything that you want to clear up about these fights, and anywhere that the people could find you, my brother. Let them have it.
Yeah, I think I should just go over my quick thoughts on everything. We got 5 fights. It won't take me too long to do that, right? First fight of the night, we have ourselves striker versus grappler, one that I think, fight inside the distance, good one, but I'm taking Diaz. I think he has more paths, much better on the ground. I think he gets it done. Talbott Cortez fight, I think, goes to decision, but although it's super close and Talbott is the rightful favorite, Cortez has the wrestling path, has good cardio and striking in his own right to keep up with him. Close fight, slightly edge Cortez there, but no, don't have to force a bet. Machado, more explosive guy. I'm going with him here, although the worry is he does tire down the stretch. I just think Machado is the better skill for skill fighter at this point, and I'll be back in here at underdog price tag. Grad, Nolan, similar thing. Grad's very explosive and close the distance. Would I be surprised if Nolan won a distance decision? Probably not, but I think Grad is very explosive, has that grappling upside as well. Another underdog to back. And that main event, it's simple. You broke it down there. Very good kickboxer in Almeida. Of course, we're not going to be surprised if he gets that knockout shot. Very dynamic, but I mean, even Pereira lost on the regional scene by submission, right? Like people coming into the sport for the very first time have the ability to lose in the ground sometimes. I think that's why Fernando's favored there. A very close fight, but again, not when you have to force any action on. So there's my quick summary of that. Very quickly there. I appreciate you breaking down the fights with me as always. We'll be doing this each and every week. Like you mentioned, your show one week, mine the next. You got the odd shows. I got the even shows. 10 weeks of this going back and forth. My channel is Plays and Fade Sports. You can go check me out there. Subscribe. We'll be there next week. And then I always post the stuff for the UFC slates as well. I'm looking forward to it, man. First, very, very fun card tomorrow. Hopefully we get some nice performances. A lot of Joe Pyfers and not the people who are trying to be like Joe Pyfer, right? So fun times, and I wish everyone the best of luck.
Absolutely, brother. Love to hear it. And, I'll do the same, man. I'll try and hit a quick little wrap up here to get the people home. So we're agreeing on Victor Diaz. We think that this is a guy who deserves to be favored here. And I think he's going to go out there and probably get the finish here, find that trademark submission. I think that he's just work too hard. I think he's too prepared, and I think he's going to be too much to overcome. I feel like it's probably a dog or pass money line situation on this Reyes Cortez fight, but ultimately I got to just go with my gut here. I feel like the more talented guy is Talbott. Ever so slightly. So I'm going to do more due diligence, more digging overnight. I've only watched 2 of his fights, but just watching his recent fights, I feel like he deals with pressure well. I think he's got really good composure. I think he's a little bit more dangerous. And one thing that I had been getting away from in my capping a little bit was the danger factor. And it's something I'm trying to keep forefront of my mind this week, especially on Contender Series, because we saw last year fights that go a way you don't expect are often ones that end in a violent fashion, right? So that is something that I'm thinking about as well this week. I think if somebody was to surprise us in violent fashion, it would be Payton Talbott. But I think that if somebody grinds their way and earns that UFC contract the old-fashioned way, they're going to be Reyes Cortez. As far as Caio Machado and Kevin Szaflarski is concerned, I don't have a great degree of confidence. Feels like a dog or pass based on the inherent volatility of the matchup. I think if either one of these guys gets on top of the other, it could be a disaster and the fight could be over shortly thereafter. But if it turns into a cage-pushing affair, you're probably just going to see a split decision and want the plus money ticket. That's my opinion. Next up, we've got Tom Nolan and Bogdan Grad. I feel like Bogdan's going to get a little bit slept on here as a short king. Maybe it's my own short king biases here, but I just feel like this is a guy who looks smaller, doesn't look as intimidating, but I feel like he's probably got a little bit more relevant experience at this time. I feel like he's probably a touch more developed in his game at this time. So I think he's catching this guy at the right time. I think he'll be back. I think he'll get wins at a later time and date in the UFC. I don't think this is the end of his road, but I think Bogdan Grad is ready for the mainstream right now. And, I think he's going to take that step forward. Main event, I'm going with the underdog, guys. I'm going with Almeida here. I think Fernando will be in the UFC. I think he can win UFC fights. I think he'll get a short notice call and beat somebody, right? I think he's that kind of guy. But I think that the UFC picked Almeida to headline this card. I do not think they picked Fernando. That's just a gut feeling for me, right? And Fernando has all the makings of a guy that if they're wrong, it's perfect, right? This guy wins. He's from a great lineage. I think it's, Pedro Hizo and Marco Huas brothers, Vale Tudo. He's trying to bring the history and the tradition back to the UFC. That's all great. But you look at the fact that Alex Pereira was at the show the last time that this guy fought. He was in the crowd. He's there watching him. They've got a lot of history together. This guy was one of the greats of the middleweights in the kickboxing era with the Adesanyas, with the Pereiras, right? And they've talked about the fact that the division has thinned out. Yet this guy, when he left kickboxing, was ranked #1 contender in the world. Lost to the champion via 2 close decisions. So he's a guy who's that damn good right now at this age. And I think it's now or never for him in MMA. So I think he's going all in. I think he's saying, okay, I'm not going to be the kickboxing champ. Found that out. I'm 35. I've done all this. I got some experience. I've fought since I was 2016, and I can go out here and get the win. So for me, I just think that Almeida, a really dangerous guy, and I need to see it. If you can beat this guy, if you can kill this guy, I want to see it because Alex Pereira couldn't do it. He tried. A lot of really good kickboxers with dangerous skills tried to do it. They couldn't, right? People have decisioned him. They've greased him. They've gotten one over on him. But I would say, the sub prop, if it's a nice plus money number, of course you take it just on speculation grounds, right? But it is speculation. And he does seem like a guy who could surprise people. I noted, if you guys look, I have very detailed breakdowns. I have 11 pages of notes on Cesar Almeida. And one of the things that I noted in my breakdown, I took a couple screen grabs of the fact that in the Pereira fights, dude, there's like guillotine exchanges. There's a couple weird things that look like Nate Diaz, Jake Paul, where my guy, they get wrapped up and he just like hits a guillotine as they're like sitting back into the ropes. So I was like, is this guy like, has he been like low-key thinking about this for this long? I just think he's a guy who's not going to be completely a fish out of water on his back. He's a Brazilian himself, right? Maybe rolled around, did a little wrestling as a kid. Give me Cesar Almeida here to surprise everybody and get the big knockout. I think this other guy will be back. I think he's a young kid with a lot of skills, but I think Almeida via knockout. That's how I think it goes down. Great fights though. And that's one I will not be surprised if I'm wrong, but I just feel like when I saw plus 230, I was stunned. I was a little bit stunned there. I thought it was going to be, plus 185 at most. So I feel like there's some value there. And honestly, it's starting to get corrected, right? Like I said, I'm stuck here in New York watching the number go down a little bit like, oh God. But I think that's going to be a great fight, man. Let's get you out of here. Guys, I just want to say one last time to make sure it's very clear. If you enjoyed this content, please go ahead and drop a like on this video. I really appreciate it. It helps me out tremendously. Get subscribed to the channel. Do a lot of great breakdowns for Contender Series, UFC. Bring on great guests. We always try and put you guys in a position to succeed, whether you're tail, fade, or indifferent. God bless you. I appreciate it. But make sure that you're subscribed to my guy Gordo's channel, Plays and Fades. Make sure you don't miss it because we're going to be right there next week, and we're going to be doing it all again. So if you guys enjoyed this, make sure you show some love, show some support. Let us know who you're rocking with. Drop a comment below as well. Let us know who you're betting on. Let us know what fight you're most excited about. Either way, we're excited that you chose to spend a little bit of time with us, guys. God bless you all. Enjoy those fights, and we'll see you next time. Take care, everybody.